Perhaps the most bizarre crime of the 20th century involved the case of Charles Manson, a self-proclaimed savior. Manson had attracted a family of fanatical followers, a group of runaways and misfits who obeyed his every command and led them to commit the most publicized and barbaric murders of our time. On the night of August 8th, 1969, actress Sharon Tate, along with 4 others, was savagely murdered in her home in Beverly Hills. The 25-year-old actress was 8 months pregnant when she was discovered the next day lying in a pool of blood. She had been stabbed 16 times. Her husband, film director Roman Polanski, was in Europe at the time. Found next to Tate on the living room floor was the body of Jay Sebring, an internationally known hairstylist. He had been shot once and stabbed 7 times. Out on the lawn, 2 more bodies were found, Abigail Folger and Wojtek Frykowski. Folger was stabbed 28 times. Frykowski, who showed signs of putting up a fight, had been shot twice and stabbed an incredible 51 times. When the police arrived the next day, they were stunned by the brutality of the killings. No one could believe that such a crime could have been committed in one of the wealthiest sections of America. After sorting through the crime scene, it became obvious that there was no motive other than murder. Nothing had been stolen. Then 2 days later, another brutal slaying occurred. Lino LaBianco and his wife Rosemary were found stabbed to death in their home in Los Feliz. Rosemary was stabbed with a knife 41 times. Lino was stabbed 12 times with a knife and 14 times with a kitchen fork. On a wall, the murderers used the victim's blood to write, "Death to pigs." At the time, the police made no connection between this crime and the Tate murders. Meanwhile, out in Death Valley, there existed a small commune made up of runaways, drifters, and outcasts. Their leader, Charles Manson, was a troublemaker who had spent half his life in prison for crimes ranging from auto theft to running a ring of prostitution. On October 10th, 2 months after the Tate murders, Manson and his followers were arrested and charged for auto theft. While in jail, one of Manson's girls bragged to a fellow inmate about the Tate murders they had committed. Soon after, word got around, and eventually detectives pieced the puzzle together. Evidently, Manson had instructed 3 of his girls to go to Tate's house and kill everyone in sight. The girls who were put on trial for the brutal stabbings were Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel. As the court case proceeded, a key witness emerged. One of Manson's followers, Linda Kasabian, had been assigned as the lookout for both the Tate and LaBianca murders. Kasabian testified that Manson had ordered both murders and that the participants were the 3 girls mentioned, as well as Charles Tex Watson, who was used as the gunman. As the story unfolded, the public became appalled and yet fascinated with Charles Manson, an unimpressive-looking man who was somehow able to attract a fanatical following and lead them to barbaric destruction. Manson apparently had the personality and the charisma to gain such obedience.
It's difficult to say what makes up a charismatic leader. Adolf Hitler wasn't the beauty of our time, and yet nevertheless he was almost a classic example of somebody who inflamed the population to follow him through disastrous types of events. Or Winston Churchill was not, except for his beautiful ability to articulate. Manson had a series of talents which did penetrate these people. He did convince them in some ways. And he was quasi-religious in many different ways, particularly parts of the Bible that he interpreted in a rather peculiar manner.
Just as intriguing was Manson's master plan to take over the world. He called his mission Helter Skelter, a name taken from a Beatles song. His strategy was to ignite a black uprising against the whites. Once the blacks gained control, Manson and his followers would then come out of hiding and assume leadership for the blacks, whom Manson felt lacked the experience to lead themselves. But what about the brutal murders? Was that part of the master plan? Did his followers really believe that killing Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas was the right step towards gaining control of the world? Whether they actually believed it or not, they did believe in following the orders of Charles Manson. When Manson appeared in court, reporters tried to understand this fanatical leader.
I don't accept the whole situation, you know. Like I was in the desert minding my business. This confusion belongs to you. It's your confusion. I don't have any confusion. I don't have any guilt. I know what I've done, and no man can judge me. I judge me.
What have you done, Charlie?
I've stayed in the desert and run with the coyotes and ate off the plants and found out you could live out there without this society. And that's where I'd like to go live, you know. But you won't let me go, will you?
You don't owe anything to society?
Pardon?
You don't owe anything to society now?
Owe him anything? I've paid him 22 years of my life. You know, I'm the other end of your society. You know, so you can ride your bicycles and do your thing. I live in your reform schools and your orphanages. I'm not against you. I'm not against you. Huh?
Are you bitter?
Bitter? No.
But
No.
you feel you've paid some price so far in your life.
Price?
To society, you said it.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make you bitter?
I don't know what that means.
How do you feel right now? Do you feel good feelings towards the judge?
I
your
feel a little
potential
nervous.
jurors?
A little nervous. I feel good feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad.
Okay, gentlemen, that's about it.
The jury found Manson and the three women guilty on 7 counts of first-degree murder. They were all sentenced to life imprisonment. Even though Manson did not physically kill anyone, the jury felt that he had such complete control of the girls that by ordering them to kill, he was just as guilty. As in all cases that involve a mass murderer, one question always arises. Was the killer sane or insane? Was Charles Manson sane when he ordered his fanatical followers to brutally kill innocent people in an effort to rule the world?
The classic legal definition, which still persists in most jurisdictions, is right from wrong. Did they know that what they were doing was wrong? I think he was not insane. I suspect that at some level he knew he was playing a game, he was conning these people. I don't think he ever fell into that himself. If that is indeed to be established, then clearly he was sane and he's to blame. He's to assume full legal blame for what took place. Were his disciples insane? It's a difficult question. Court said no, that they were sane, and I think I would go along with that too.
When analyzing mass murderers like Charles Manson, it's always tempting to claim that they were insane. How else can we explain their demented behavior? However, in the 4 cases we have seen today, Albert De Salvo, Richard Speck, Charles Whitman, and Charles Manson, each of these men knew full well what they were doing, knew it was wrong, and yet committed these terrible crimes anyway. As we continue to search for answers, one thing we can look at is what they all had in common. In these 4 cases, each man seemed to derive pleasure from controlling the fate of their victims in one way or another.
It is called, I think, among sociologists, power, the ability to control the actions, behavior, outcome of others, and they have it in a supreme godlike sense. So by whim alone, Whitman in the tower, aiming his gun, kills some, wounds some, because he decides to shoot at that target rather than others. Manson, I suspect, chooses a household whimsically and sends his troops out to do the killings there. Speck finds himself in a fortuitous circumstance. It could well be that part of the pleasure is I can decide whether to let them live or die, and I'm in every case going to kill them. But I still make those decisions, and it is so pleasurable. I have life and death control over total strangers, and you notice they always carry out that life and death control in these cases by killing them. And therefore, there is some additional pleasure involved. Besides controlling them, there is that additional, who knows, feeling that is accomplished by putting them out of their misery.
Today, we as citizens must face the fact that we live in a violent society. And as long as there are people who derive pleasure from inflicting pain on his fellow man, this trend will continue. This has been a presentation of The Worst Crimes of the 20th Century.